Man.
The man.
Do you know, like, yeah, man, I appreciate you. I want to start this off with that. Like, we're going into all these different spaces and like, I appreciate you. I appreciate you
bro.
for the work that you're doing, for the message that you're sharing, for helping people understand the opportunity where they might see something different, like more like challenges and like failure. But it's like, no, something good can come from this. Why do you still do this work?
Sure. There's there's an answer I always give, right? But,
Please don't give me that answer.
But I'm not gonna give you that answer, right? Like, to be honest, there's a part of me that feels like, one somehow needs to be a keeper of justice. It's not a commercial answer. And I'll tell you why, because of the type of work that we do and in the areas that we do it in, and I guess because of scarcity as well, you find that a lot of opportunities that are supposed to be going to a lot of hardworking entrepreneurs or micro enterprises or early stage small businesses, those opportunities aren't getting to them because that money ends up landing in the hands of people who are heavy capitalists. And my view has never been to say, don't be capital driven, don't be profit driven, don't be cash flow driven. But my view has always been, if that money is intended for good deed, can the money get into the hands of those people, then you still get your 15 or 25% management fee. And I think that's been the real driver for me, which is why even in our interactions and engagements with corporates and some government agencies, not an arrogant stance, but the moment we see the conversation is sort of leans towards brown envelopes, sort of leans towards undercutting the small guy, we sort of don't entertain that. And, I sit back sometimes and I think maybe that is what has contributed to what would be perceived as slow growth, as opposed to the other. But I think for me is that you build something more solid when you build it the right way.
Oh, wow.
And there's already trust. And I might be of the limited view that says, let me grab it for myself. But then I grab it for myself and lose the trust in the community that we're trying to build. So I think for me, it would be keepers of justice, in my view, ensuring that the right people's opportunities get to them. Because I think for me personally, I've been able to underpin what enough looks like when I get to it at various levels when I've gotten to it. So I think for me, the real drive, and I think because of the work that we do, was funded by my company. Before I sold it 3 years ago. It's a company I've been running for 16 years. At the 16th year, we sold. And for me, to know that we had contributed to that means that the build for me was honest.
Yeah.
So which is why, I guess in business, because business is cutthroat, the mindset is, but why do you carry such a mindset in a cutthroat world? It's purely because our people need it. When you look at the divide that we see today, you look at it, you research it, you'll see it. Driving into Sandton, you see it. Just behind Weinberg is Alex. That's less than 3 minute drive and you're there. If you're walking, it's a 10-minute walk from the Alex FM studios all the way to the other side, to the tip of Sandton. And then that just goes to show you that, I remember I attended an event years ago, and one of the ministers was speaking, and she was asked, but minister, what will you do when the people who are very hungry jump over fences? Like, I'm gonna pack up and go back home. I was like, what a horrible answer.
Yeah, because what you're not saying is, oh no, we're empowering people in this way. So that is not something that is a reality that we can consider. No, my plan is,
I'm going to pack up and go home in the villages and be a nobody. I'm like, but what? So I think for me, it's really just that, being keepers of justice, for the right reasons.
You had this journey with your other business, building it for 16 years. And you are one of those rare entrepreneurs from a South African context. We are in an early environment and ecosystem where you have had an exit, right? Like, you sold your business. Yeah. How much did you learn in that entire experience? And you can't summarize 16 years, but like, how important was it that you were able to sell this business, versus say, someone that says build for legacy, build forever, or someone, that shuts down because things, get difficult?
I think for me also to also then unpack it for the benefit of the viewers, in our cell, what we did, there were 3 components that we identified: the legal standing, the legal entity, the equipment and machinery that we had, and the client book. The client book that we had still had 2 running contracts that would, I guess, expire, and one would expire in 3 years, the other one in 2 years of us selling, and then a very healthy client book in my view. So what we then did is that we didn't sell the whole because we wanted to keep the legal entity. Because of the heritage, the years, to be able to continue telling that story. And we could morph it into something different over the years. Then we sold the machinery and equipment on its own. Then some of them we resold to the manufacturer, Roland, and the Roland dealer in the country. And then the client book we then sold, to a group of 2 guys. But then for me, it was, I guess, got to the point where we started doing this work as passion work. That was financed by my group of companies, which is Intercessor Army Franchising. The first company I started, registered, that still exists to date, right? But we venture equity, we do other things, right, in the back, in the behind the scenes. And I think for me, I just gotten to a point where the passion in the new work had grown deeper, had grown bigger. And I think for me, it was just repurposing everything I'd learned over the years, from selling amagwinya to sweets, to veggies, to running an internet cafe, to growing, to being a print broker, to being a printing business, to then being manufacturing. It was a lot of lessons, but I think that now one brings them into the other side and morphing into a bigger and a different dream, but still the same continuum, in my view, of wanting to be impactful, building sustainability, building livelihoods. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm obviously grateful for is when I started that business, I was a young dude at the age of 16. My highest grade was grade 9, went to an FET college, Bulelani West College, did the NCOR course, did the N1, N2, dropped out of college because the money ran out, couldn't finish or specialize in anything. So for me when in the initial stages when I started, was really just to put food on the table and help my mother, was socially considered a single mother to 2 boys, and my cousin was living with us at the time. Was really just, how do I put food on the table and help pay for rent and lights? So to be able to exit at a point where I've got 2 boys, I'm able to provide for them, provide for myself, that for me, I guess, was a beautiful thing. But I guess it was always the conversation of what do you utilize as the next layer and the next step of development and growth, in my view.
Yeah.
So that's the reasons behind jumping out, because that passion had grown much deeper. But it was a big battle because I loved what I had built.
Yeah.
It took a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, lost friendships, lost relationships, lost years, lost fun. And I think the lost part for me is I guess I hold on and I marry these things because I didn't go to a matric dance, because I lost that opportunity, because I had to exit at a very young and early age to almost grow and become an adult. Next thing you know, I'm working this thing, I have to fend and put food on the table. I've got employees to look after before I look after myself. Only starting to earn a salary after 10 years or 12 years of doing business, like a good salary, you understand? So for me, it was to say, because one had built a habit out of the experiences that they've had, call them trauma experiences in the past, of holding on to things. Now I was holding on to this thing, and even my conversations with my mentor consistently were, well, it's entirely up to you what you need to do, but you are the only one who knows what you need to do. If we tell you what you need to do, you will always hold us as the people who told you what you need to do.
Yeah.
So when I eventually found that point and that center, everything started to then align and streamline itself towards what I actually wanted to do as my next layer of activity.
Yeah. 16 years is a very long time to stick.
I mean, so no. So
you see that heavy, like,
it's. I mean, in totality, it's 21 years. It's 2 years informal, where I was doing odd things. Then, because the reason why it's 2 years informal is because my last days in that FET college, that Bulelani West College, was in 2003, late or early 2004, and then only registered the business in 2006 on the 16th of August in 2006. We started actively trading in 2007 and delivering matric jackets, which would be our actual first big order. That order was about 15,720. We delivered. We ended up making 800 rand. I gave my mother 500. Kept the 300, and then thought to myself, and with the point at which we delivered, I think in the month of March, if I'm not mistaken. Then in April onwards, I'm sort of thinking to myself, well, the next matric run is be the next year. What do I do in between? Then the thought of starting this internet cafe came to mind. Then I started crowdfunding, getting resources locally. My back opposite neighbors were demolishing their house, so I got wardrobe doors from them. The local supermarket store gave me their crates. Zintle gave me 200 rand, 300 rand to go buy material at a material shop. My brother gave me his Pentium 1 computer and an HP 610 inkjet printer, and Jay gave me his bin and notebook and pen. I still have them till today to note stuff down.
Yeah.
Felicia gave me 410, in actual fact, to register the business and to commute. So, and my aunt bought me ink. So it was a community, I think for me, initiative. So when I think about, I guess, the 21 years and 19 years formal, full on, being in business was tough. But what I always say to the guys is the things that I had to learn in business, I learned the tough way. As opposed to someone who is able to network themselves in the right way, but also who is able to. So this is why I believe then education becomes important.
Yeah.
Education and then also work experience, because when you're in a job, what that then does is that it puts you in an environment where you understand governance. You understand that, yes, when you start a business, you have to be all things to all people, but at some point you must exit those things. But if you've never ever worked a job like me, and I'm trying to grow this business, and I'm trying to be everything in every department, and I don't think that any staff member is good enough to run that department because I am the man, then I'm constantly standing in the way of the growth of the business. Then I started to pick this up years later when I'm seeing friends or new acquaintances, new networks, and they are jumping ship, and they've jumped ships from financial institutions, from whatever. And in 5 years, whatever they're building sort of is taking shape. And you sort of kick back and look at that and pause and think, well, now I get it, right? It's a mix of education, network, social equity, but also most importantly, they understand the governance. You understand what to do with the money. And I think for me, which is why then I've taken a deep desire towards the work that I do with the guys Basekasi, to say it's not dumbing down the information, but it's simplifying the information so that you get to that effect.
Yeah.
Where someone says, oh, so that's what you actually mean. Because the reason why there's a big divide in and around adoption of new technologies, adoption of opportunities, or even the lack of information being shared is because the information is not presented in a palatable manner to the way in which the guys and the ladies are actually doing business.
Yeah.
So when I think about these 19 years and having an exit 16 years in, but continuing with the journey, sure, man, it's been a lot of ups and downs, man. Yeah. Yo, I don't even know where to start. I mean, there've been so many lessons, so many painful moments. There've been moments where I wanted to close down, moments where I didn't want to, but I made a decision that by this date, next month, I'm closing. Like, for instance, 7 years in, I'm still running the internet cafe. It's not moving at all. Mid-year, that 7th year, 7.5 years, I guess, I make a decision. It's May now. In June, I'm closing.
What are you using as the, 1 to 3 things that are saying, you know what? Ayisebenzi le nto. It's not working. I need to close this down. And how are you making that decision to say, okay, these are the 3 things that I'm realizing now, okay, because this business cannot do these 3 things or this one thing, it needs to not exist so that I can move on to the things that are actually going to be able to.
So I think for me, a couple of the things is, would I ever advise an entrepreneur or anyone, an aspirant, to stick it out as long as I have? I definitely would not, actually. But however, I stuck it through and it worked. I don't necessarily think that's a formula. I think that could have been a timing thing. It could have been a faith thing. It could have been a journey thing more than anything. Because I think one of the things that we learn in business that is a solid principle is learn fast, fail fast. The quicker you learn, the quicker you apply, the quicker you fail, the quicker you know what you should not be doing, so that you work on the things that you need to do and grow and scale then you grow and scale that particular business, you know. But I think for me, when I sort of think about in the years that one has been in it, and then getting to a point where you now say 7.5 years in that I'm gonna close, is because at that point I'd given up, nothing was moving. I'm working solid, but no money. Now there's pressure from home, you know, and I'm working from home in a single garage. It's in Tembisa, sharing with pots, pans, dust, and all that stuff. You know, because things weren't moving. But the strangest thing, that's why I don't know what to call it, right? We had changed nothing in our model. Literally the next month, from the point at which in May, you know, it's the 7th year in May, I said we're closing this thing. The next month in June, things totally changed. I can't explain it. They totally changed. People were coming in for stuff. We're making actual money that I could actually see at that time for us. I could actually see. And then from these things, then allowed me to hire 2 employees. Those 2 employees allowed me to have the time to now start focusing on this print brokerage business. And then from there, things started to then just was one layer and leveled from the next to the one to the next. But however, this is why then I talk about and I emphasize the reading, the education, the networks, the corporate governance that you get from a job. Because my firm view, you know, as I said by, I think it's Dr. Marcus Arakova, if I'm not mistaken, one of the co-founders of Regenesis, I might be butchering his name, you'll forgive me. Says that we start businesses according to the level of our education and the level of our exposure and the level of our networks, right? And the level of our education could be assimilated in formal and informal learning. The level of our exposure could be through books, through TV, through networking events and the sort. And you must then understand that at that time, there are no networking events that are happening ekas. You know, and as a young dude, you know, imagine none of your peers are attending none of the stuff. You are literally the unicorn in as far as wanting to do this thing, because all of us had a solid dream. Go get a job, get a 4-room house, get a nice car, get a beautiful lady, get kids, live your life.
The plan, the golden plan.
That's it, man. You're living la vida loca. You understand? So I think that for me, getting to that point, the 3 things that you ask about is, when I saw that, I think number 1, I'd realized that I'd lost hope in this thing that I thought was going to be a short-term thing that was going to bring me daily my income, and it didn't. So I'd lost hope. The second thing is we're not making any money at all. And I'd realized that over the 7 years, there wasn't a point where we were making money, but it was the blind faith that said, let's keep on building this thing and keep on building this thing. And the third one for me was, you know, in reality, you know, it was a failed business or a failed business model. And that's what I thought at the time. And I just given up to saying, I'm going to get a job. Or it doesn't matter if it's in retail or I'm digging trenches, I'm just going to go get a job. And I think those were there was nothing philosophical. There's nothing, it was just cartel. And I was just tired. Bro.
Yeah. You know, I had a conversation with Caritas from Kula. And we were talking about entrepreneurship and the relationship that we have to it. And when you're growing up, it's a very different relationship, because entrepreneurship just seems like a survival tactic to put food on the table. Like most people don't have a choice. You go out and find money.
Yeah.
And you learn how to make money as well. And maybe that speaks to like the township entrepreneurship narrative.
Yeah.
What was it when you were starting 16 years ago versus now, where you've written a book and hosted hundreds of events and had thousands of entrepreneurs experiencing the training, the, you know, learning from entrepreneurs they admire and all of that. What was that narrative 16 years ago? And how would you say were you navigating to try and figure out how to do this thing the right way?
I mean, the narrative 16 years ago, definitely spot on with Caritas. all I wanted to do was just put food on the table. So it was really starting a subsistence business. I mean, and you sort of look at the stats. The stats talk about 60% of entities that are started formal and informal are subsistence business. This person is that can't get a job, was in a job, was retrenched, is trying something new, but they're starting with the big driver of I want to put food on the table. You know. But the big thing for me is that one kept with that mindset. I think longer than they should. Longer than they should have. And I think there are levels and scales. I think you start as a subsistence entrepreneur, and then you move into, I guess, what I think is your hustle. And then you move to a startup, which is formalized. Then you move to, startup could also then, depending on the sectors you're in, could also be assimilated as micro enterprise. Then you move into small, you then into mid small, then you then are tapping into exiting into your large, medium scale. And I think that for me, one of the things that I picked up is part of it was just mindset. The mindset that said, I'm comfortable where I am. Why do anything more? And over and above that was just the mindset where you viewed yourself and you thought of yourself as small. And I think those limiting beliefs are the same limiting belief that held one hostage, from moving to their next level. Even though everything that you had done, you have propped yourself up as being the go-to in certain industries and certain spaces. So I think for me, it was just being able to just rework that mindset where one is able to just tell themselves, no, man, I actually have an economic right to exist. But most importantly, whatever it is that I've built, I'm building for scaling at a rapid scale. And maybe then when I sort of think about my internet cafe journey, and I think maybe that's the frustration as well, was the fact that it was monotonous. And if the mindset then was scale, then we could have then found ways of scaling or search for information in how we scale and how we franchise and how we do all of that stuff, because that was the big thinking, but it actually never actually really got to that. So which is why then I always say to the guys, when you say that you want to go into business or rather start a business, it's important for us to then unpack what your journey is going to look like by understanding the type of entrepreneur you want to be and the type of business you want this to be, right? Because if that business is going to be purely centered around your social equity, then that business might be limited and capped because you will always be needed in the room and in those spaces, because you're not building a business that is going to leverage itself around proper systems and processes and around your team. So I'm making 50 million a year, but I'm a hustler. The moment I'm out of the picture, there is no business, because I've literally told myself, and I believe that I am the business. And that is a limiting belief, because a business is its own legal entity and own domicilium. When you start, it replicates its character traits from you as the founder and owner, because people do business with people that they like.
Yeah.
But over time, you need to then, you need to find ways of building systems. And what systems do, they do a beautiful job of exiting you. In no time, you sort of see yourself, you've got more time than you usually had. Now you've got extremely more time than you usually had. Now you realize you no longer need it. But you then don't delegate, and then you don't delegate and derelict. You delegate, but you still preside over the business. Why? Because you carry the vision. And you then now get to do the entrepreneurial things that you're passionate about, which is actually being an entrepreneur, innovating, coming up with new concept, business development, creativity, presiding over all the key individuals that are supposed to then feed through all the technical things to the technical operators in the business.
Yeah. You talked about like just the difference in mindset from survivalist. Survivalist is, I want to put food on the table. Yeah. I might not be prioritizing the growth of this business. It's really about this business being able to put food on the table and allowing me or my family to be able to eat and do the things that we want. Yeah. Versus that growth mindset, which is like, we've formalized this business or built some structure, and now we want to grow this into an entity of itself that achieves certain things as well. Yeah. What are the differences in the mindset between these two people? But also, how do you graduate from this place to this other one?
So the difference in the mindset is really the one's mindset is a scarcity mindset. It's a mindset, the scarcity, but all the reasons are reasons that make sense. It's the reasons that say, but if I buy a bigger car, they'll take me serious when I go to those meetings. They'll take you serious anyway. I had to learn that the hard way. They'll take you serious anyway. Because if you're grafting and you're able to prove your value, they'll take you serious anyway. You know? So are these things, but sometimes you then look at these things deep down and understand that they're driven by ego. So for me, it took a very long time to unwork that. It was a difficult process because you are this one individual who is going against the grain. You know, guys, let's support township business. What you talking about now? Guys, let's buy local. You know, buys, you know, the guys, LVMH doesn't know us, whoever doesn't know us. Yeah, if you like it, cool, but support your own. That was a boring conversation to have 11 or 12 years ago, right? So what I then realized between these two mindsets, the one mindset is really driven around, you know, how do we get and eat now? There is no long term. There is no long term. There is a long term for me, but no long term for the business. There is no long term plan, risk assessment list. There is no risk mitigation plan. There is no clear SWOT analysis that is put in place. There are no clear systems in building this business. It's literally a nomayin. So you are stuck in that virtuous loop of being a nomayin. When masks come out, you apply for that. When cleaning comes out, you apply for that. When whatever comes out, so we never really know who you are, which is why I think for me, when it was quite fascinating because I worked at an internet cafe, so you saw almost majority of the businesses that I registered that came that we drafted profiles for and all that stuff. All of them is trading and projects. All of them is trading and projects.
Because they don't want to be specific.
Because you don't want to be specific. You want to cast a wide net. And that's how we also then started as. We were Intercessor Army franchising, but then you look at the description. We then had internet cafe, petrol station, because then we didn't want to limit ourselves at things, you understand? But then the challenge with that is that because of that mindset, you then sort of get stuck in that thinking that every opportunity that is on the table is for you. But not every single opportunity that is on the table is an opportunity you need to participate in. So it also then takes a lot of discipline. But I think on the other side, in the other mindset is a mindset that is around how do you build longer? You know, how do you build things that last? How do you build with a long term in mind? How do you build things that last longer? How do you build things that don't technically need you with the right type of teams in place, right? And I think also being able to then graduate or jump over to the other side means that you're in spaces that challenge you. You know, you are rooting yourself in networks with individuals who are asking you the tough questions, but also you're rooting yourself in spaces where they don't ask those tough questions. Those conversations happen over your head. And I've had a number of mentors who've brought me in rooms where no one said anything directly to me. You just observe people's movement. And in the things that they were saying directly, you learned to say, yo, man, I need to change my view of entrepreneurship. I need to change my view of the type of business. I'm stuck. I am the business. When I'm sick, the business is sick, and the financial show. When I'm technical, it shows in my management accounts, because when I'm technically involved, the sales drop because I'm not active in the entrepreneurial work. When the sales are there and we've delivered on the order, now it shows that I'm actually grafting, and the arrow actually drops even further. So I think for me, it just says, you know, have a deep desire to disrupt yourself. You know, ask yourself, for me, it's a couple of questions, but ask yourself, what am I doing to stand in the way of the growth of my business? You understand me? Measure out the tasks that you actually do to then eliminate at the end of the month, at the end of the week. You know, what of these tasks or which of these tasks were technical and could have been delegated to other people? And I think being able to huddle around the team and ask the questions, how do we make this thing move quicker, move faster, move better, you know, without us? Is there equipment or technological tools to optimize our efficiency? And if there are, how do we adopt?
Yeah. What was the problem that you guys identified and wanted to solve when you started Township Entrepreneur Alliance?
I mean, it was a simple one, right? I think for me, in ignorance, I would get questions from, in my ignorance to the response to those questions, I would get questions from peers, friends, strangers in my community in Tembisa asking questions. I thought, man, you should know that. That's simple information. I mean, how do you register a business? What are you asking me? You understand? But I still answer. But then over time, the more and more it happened, I realized that, no, man, the people actually don't know basic information. Then I then realized that I guess the differential between me and them was the curiosity I had. And the curiosity mixed with braveness means that you got onto a taxi not knowing how you'd come back home to go search for this department you'd never ever heard. You don't even know what they do, to sit there in the lobby just to ask questions. So what do you guys do here? You know, was then the use of internet was not as great as it is now. Now you go onto your LLMs or your ChatGPT or whatever, prompts you up. You go into Google. Then we had Yahoo Mail. The connectivity was slow. There are no Wi-Fi zones. I'm broke. I don't have data. Buying data, sorry, buying data then is not a thing, right? And I think then for me, and then I think then for me, when I sort of think about that, right, and that start and all of those things that were not in place, it sort of then just brings me to the fact that, you know, you build, and I think these are the conversations, and I just want to just pause your question a little bit and just, you know, get this off my chest, man. It's entrepreneurship is tough. You know, there was a year where I'd shout out to everyone, go into it. Then there was a season where I said, run the heavens away from it. Because I think in reality, it takes so much out of you. It takes so much away from you. You know, that journey, that sacrifice, you lose so much. Yes, it will reward you, but the guarantee of that lost time might not be a reality because of the fact that you're building as an African in South Africa, and the system was built to exclude you from participating in mainstream economic opportunities, meaning that you now have two fights that you're fighting. You're fighting a system, and then you are fighting people who look exactly like you, same skin color, that are in positions of authority who don't get it, who are now, who have deeply entrenched their minds in saying, but no, what is this thing? Is another. Is a whatever. Who are then starstruck in the glitz and glam, who are not continuing the revolutionary movement of economic emancipation for all of our people in our own lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the baton, for me, in my view, has been passed on. That's why the significance of this podcast is of the highest level, because Nelson Mandela, Robert Sebukwe, all these amazing individuals, were sacrificed themselves, sacrificed their lives, their youth, so, for freedom of movement. Now our journey is, the baton is passed on to us for economic emancipation and financial emancipation for our people. And I think that that's the grave and deep responsibility that I believe that we have in being able to then switch over to the other side. So in answering your question, the two main things that inspired us to start, and the reason why we decided to start in 2015, was to do two things only. Number one, to create a platform and a space where 20, that was our view, 20 or less micro enterprises or aspirant would come together in Tembisa to do two things: share information, get to know each other, with the hopes, and our equation was with the hope that they will do business with each other. That's it. First day we started, there was 161 people that were there. And then we just hosted them as just networking days or networking mornings. It was on a Saturday morning. The guys would come, they just simply network. But the more and more you spoke to the entrepreneurs, you got deeply entrenched in the struggle, in the pain, in the disappointment. And we went there, they didn't this, they didn't that, they didn't that. Then one felt a deeper need to want to solve for certain things. And the continuous solve has led us to where we are now, 10 years later with T.
Yeah. And it's an insane journey, right? Like from that one first event to now going nationwide across townships in so many different provinces, where you guys are not just now, here you can meet this person, but now it's like, okay, but who's the entrepreneur from this area who's done great things?
Yes.
Can they come into this room and give back, plow back through knowledge, skills, whatever it is, and say, hey, this is what I learned. But you've also now had partners come on who also, provide education, skills, lessons and stuff like that. How would you describe, the experience that you guys are hosting now versus the one that you had right at the beginning? It's worlds apart. It's worlds apart.
It's worlds apart. It's worlds apart. It's totally worlds apart. And I think for me, it's worlds apart because you now have some resources to play with. meaning now we do way more. Um, con- arguably we do way more than what we are supposed to be doing. My team would tell you that we do way more than what our scope actually is. But that the reason why we do that is I always tell the team we're auditioning for the next stage and level. If we quoted R1 and the work deliverable required us to only use 60 cents, and we only use 60 cents to deliver on that work, then we'll continually, for a very long time, only get what we've delivered on. But if we're able to then reinvest that and also then deliver a wow effect to our stakeholders, guess what? They want to work with us over and over and over again. But in terms of the work and the impact, man, it's totally worlds apart. Some of the work that we do, man, is, we've got the enterprise development programs that we run in the background that no one hardly ever sees. We've got the Kasi Business Workshop that travels out nationwide. That's the one that's in your face. That's the one that's in the media. That's the one that people talk about. That's the one that has a lot of faces that go in and out. We've got an alumni group of all the pitch winners that participate. So it's a number of different things. But for me, we do all of these things, and some of them with our own money that we put into these things, because you gotta bet on yourself. You gotta better the product, number one, consistently improve and evolve the product, bet on yourself so that you're able to have a case that you actually built up and show to any stakeholders that you actually want to entice and bring on board. That's my view.
What's the impact that you've seen happen with entrepreneurs that go through these workshops and the programs?
Man, I think for me, sure. I mean, the one is with our Kasi Business Workshops, we measure that through a survey that we put out. And 68% of the entrepreneurs who attend those workshops, on average, 68% have said that they do business with each other. That, for me, my job is done. But we don't just do that. Then we single out one individual who then win some money and be part of our community, a private community of alumni. Then you've got these exhibitors who come, who then get product images, 1-minute video shoots that aren't branded, as well as a number of other things that they then get on the day's payment devices. You then get these master classes. So I think that for me, it's been the number one on the list has been the practical information measure that we measure for, the practicality of the information, by the audience being able to tell us that we've actually received information that's practical for us to apply in our businesses. We met people that we'll do business with, through the now deeper programs that we run, the ED programs. Now you don't even ask. Now you see the revenue change. You see the entrepreneur, moving from making 25,000 Rand a month to 150,000 Rand a month in 8 months. Then you then see that it's not us. And that's what I always say to the guys. It's not us. All it is, it's us just contributing 1% to that person who already has fire burning in them. Because these guys who are high growth have got a lot of fire burning in them. But because they've got a lot of fire burning in them and they're not aligned in the right direction, they're burning every single thing in their path, thinking that, it's the right thing to do. But the moment they shift their perspective a little bit, then they're able to then direct that growth in a rapid manner. So one of my mentors used to say, the reason why, he didn't used to say, he used to do. I'd sit with him for an hour, and all he'd do is he'd ask me questions. And then after an hour, the session is done. Then I picked up later that in actual fact, I've answered myself by answering those questions. And some of those questions weren't even related to the things that I wanted to talk about. Sometimes I can't go in there with an agenda, but the questions answer me and all the other things that I then need to then achieve. Then I then realized that the concept of also then getting mentors or someone to mentor you doesn't necessarily mean that you only need to get mentors that are in the same line and industry that you're in. That when I had a mentor who ran a very big financial company, a multi-billion rand financial company, and then because he didn't understand the industry, he'd ask me deep questions, but why are you doing this? You should be doing things that bring you money. Why don't you focus on... Now you have to then justify that deeper by answering it deeply, not just saying, no, it's what I like. Now he's looking at the numbers like, but dude, you could be doing other things. Now you have to be able to go deeper with the number and structures.
I mean, from the content online to these really important, in-session engagements with entrepreneurs, you also wrote a book. Tell us why this was important, but also what someone would take from it as well.
Man, the Township Entrepreneurs Guide to Get Things Done. So maybe the background is we wrote that book on the back of the challenges that these entrepreneurs, so there are two things that informed it. The challenges that they're experiencing in business and what they would like to learn. That's the two things that we ask them every workshop and everywhere we go. So we took a mix of them. We took 10 of them, and then we put them in the book. But once we realized that there were so many and they're so extensive, if we wrote about all of them, then the book would be scattered. So then we decided, well, let's talk about the basics of business, focusing on the mindset, focusing on telling your story, focusing on sales, marketing, and the sort. So the book has got 10 chapters. The first chapter unpacks my story, at the introductory of my story at an early stage, so that you understand, because it's directed at micro enterprises nationwide, but purely because of the fact that there's over 1.8, now 1.9 million informal businesses. We then, in the language as well, directed it to them, but any small business would benefit from the information written in there. But it was to say, here's your literature now, literature that you can own. Now you don't have an excuse, because the naming convention speaks directly to you. And then from the simple, basic principles, basic questions, it almost operates as a guide and a workbook to help you navigate your journey. Now you understand things that you and I would overlook, like what is cash flow? Things that you and I would overlook, like what is an elevator pitch? We break down those simple concepts in a simple and practical measure. Because my view is that this is the book that you keep in your pocket or you keep in your bag. When you're sitting in a networking event and they ask you quickly to pitch, you run into the bathroom quickly, you page to the page. Okay, cool. That's
if you have enough time, for sure.
If you've got enough time, and maybe you're number 5, you go to the bathroom, you refresh it quickly, then you go back. That was the idea around it. But for me, it's the first of a series of book. Out of there, get things done in sales and marketing, in tech and whatsoever. That's the series. But also it was important to write this first one so that the language for the publisher, they get the language and they get the tone, which is why I wrote this one. Starts all the way to finish, 40,000 words. So that when we then hand over to our publisher, because I'm also time scarce, they then can be able to pick up on the wording and the wording and tonality, but you've got a series of literature that you are then pushing out to these township entrepreneurs nationwide. So this book for me is for micro enterprises and small businesses that are based in the township and out of the township. This book is for the enterprise development head, the CEO, the CFOs, brother, sister, cousins, micro business, small business that they keep going to every single weekend, that they want to mentor, but they don't have the time and they want to see them develop and grow. This is the book that you buy for. This is the book that you buy for your cohort of entrepreneurs that are in your enterprise development program, your CSI program, so that they're able to then navigate and grow and scale.
Yeah. What do you think is one piece of advice you would give someone who's starting a business, Ekas?
It's this one, man. I think the first part hinges deeply on the mindset. Starting Ekasi is a geographical start. That should not be your start and end all. And I think the big one for me is to really drive a message that says, start Ekasi, but understand that might be where you produce and you consume, but the end of your business must not be there. Start with the bigger picture in mind. Start with unpacking what the value chain of your industry is and how big and how large can you grow and scale this particular business. The moment you've unpacked that, for me, in my view, then nothing really, there's a lot of things that will stand in your way, but nothing that stands in your way will sort of assimilate itself as a defeat to the end. So the big thing for me is get things done. Don't overthink the start. Start, you'll perfect as you move along. One of the greatest tech companies cell phone tech companies in the world started as a supermarket in their country. And you are here sweating the small stuff. Navigate it, keep working at it, keep putting in the time, keep watching this podcast, still keep getting literature, keep attending the right events with the right type of individual, building a tribe around you. But most importantly, get things done. Everything you learn and you hear, work on it. Put in the effort, put in the time, work on it. I can't emphasize that enough, because if you don't, then this will be the 100th podcast you've watched and you've done nothing. Whereas you can take one or two things from this podcast as an actionable item and then go and apply it to the things you want to do.
Yeah. What is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey?
The township is powerful. The township economy, the township is a very, very powerful space. The township is the next frontier of growth for any large scale business. The next space that they're looking to grow is in the township. If only we would then reposition how we view and look at ourselves. You see, last night I attended 30 years of Label M, and I was very honored that he invited me. But one of the things that he said is the Disney movie that he participated in and pioneered and spearheaded, The Lion King. The investors who invested, which was Disney, invested 25 million. To date, it's grossed 9.5 billion. It's African. The three main things that contribute to the story is the sound, the people, and the actual story. Sorry, it's the music, the story, and the people. And it's all African, it's all South African. So if only we as South Africans and the leaders who are in power would understand that investing in your own things, you are not investing in them to waste money, but you're investing in them to ring fence any other economies or countries that are seeking to come and root out the rich minerals that we have. So I think for me, the bigger and the reason why it's such an important thing is because when I started and my big dream was to have a corner office with a view, not because the office was nice, because I viewed the township as insignificant. So to any small business out there, and information I wish I knew that would have actually propped up my courage is to say, you are at the right place. It might seem like you are dispositioned and townships are concentration camps. That's what they were created to be, but you are at the right place. Harness that to be able to then channel that energy, channel those frustrations, channel that pain to growing yourself. But it's the next frontier of economic growth.
Sure, man. Again, I'm gonna end this the way I started it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, bro. Sure. I enjoyed this.
Thank you, bro.
Thanks, bro.